Manchineel has a reputation strong enough that some scientists genuinely consider it one of the most hazardous trees on the planet, and the danger doesn't wait for anyone to take a bite. Simply standing beneath it during rainfall can cause skin irritation, since water running down the leaves picks up compounds from the tree and drips them directly onto anyone sheltering underneath, which means the tree can cause harm without a single leaf or fruit ever being touched. It's found along coastlines in the Caribbean, Central America, and parts of Florida, typically growing right at the edge of the sand, sometimes just a few steps from where waves reach the shore. The fruit is small, green, and glossy, close enough in appearance to an apple that it's earned nicknames referencing exactly that resemblance in local languages across the region. Because tourists unfamiliar with the tree have historically wandered under it or picked up fallen fruit out of curiosity, many coastal communities now mark Manchineel trees deliberately, painting a stripe of bright warning color directly onto the trunk, or posting small metal signs at the base so beachgoers know to stay clear before getting close enough to be affected. Today it exists almost entirely as a cautionary subject, showing up in nature documentaries, coastal safety pamphlets, and beach warning signage, and essentially nowhere else, since there's no version of this plant that shows up anywhere near food. Doll's eyes got its nickname the first time someone actually looked closely at the fruit, because the resemblance is immediate and hard to unsee once you notice it. Each small white berry is marked with a single dark spot that sits almost exactly where a pupil would, giving the whole cluster the unsettling look of a handful of tiny eyeballs staring back from the underbrush. It's native to forests across eastern North America, typically found tucked into the cool, shaded, damp patches of forest floor beneath a full tree canopy, rarely growing out in open sun. The berries sit atop thick, vividly red stems that branch out from a central cluster, creating a color contrast between the white fruit and red stem that reads as strange and artificial even from a distance, almost like something arranged on purpose rather than grown naturally. That visual shock is exactly why foraging guides and nature educators use it constantly as a teaching example, a plant memorable enough on sight that once someone has seen it and learned what it is, they're unlikely to ever mistake it for something safe to eat. Today it shows up almost entirely in woodland-themed garden design planted deliberately by gardeners, chasing that same eerie visual effect in a shaded corner of a yard, rather than for any practical or edible purpose. Ackee has a safety window built directly into how the fruit grows, since it only becomes edible at the exact moment it splits open naturally on the tree, and not a single moment before that. Unripe or improperly opened, Ackee carries a natural toxin that breaks down and fades specifically as the pod matures and cracks open on its own, which makes timing the single most important factor in preparing it safely, more important than almost anything else about the fruit. It traces back to West Africa, later carried to the Caribbean through historical trade and migration, where it became so deeply woven into local cooking that it eventually took on national significance far beyond its original home. A bright red pod slowly splits apart to reveal glossy black seeds nestled against pale, creamy yellow flesh, an opening process that looks almost deliberate, like a small case cracking apart to reveal something valuable inside. Cooks who prepare it traditionally know to wait for that natural opening and never force a pod open early, since doing so risks using flesh that hasn't finished breaking down its natural toxin yet. Today, Ackee holds the distinction of being Jamaica's national dish, most famously paired with saltfish in a breakfast dish served across the island every single morning, a pairing so iconic it's recognized well beyond Jamaica's borders. Elderberry carries a kind of built-in trick, since the exact same fruit can be either harmless or genuinely unpleasant to eat, depending entirely on whether it's raw or cooked. Unripe or raw uncooked berries contain a natural compound that ripe, properly cooked berries lose entirely during the cooking process, which means the same plant produces something that behaves completely differently depending on how it's handled before eating. It grows wild across both Europe and North America, commonly found along fence lines, riverbanks, and other slightly disturbed, sunny edges where dense thickets can establish themselves over time. Clusters of small, dark purple berries hang in flat-topped bunches that grow heavy enough by late summer to visibly bend the thin stems supporting them toward the ground. That transformation through cooking is really the entire story of how elderberry gets used safely, since heat does the essential work work of converting a fruit with a natural chemical defense into something people have processed and enjoyed for generations. Today it shows up almost exclusively in syrups, jams, and wine, always after proper cooking and processing, rarely if ever eaten raw straight off the branch by anyone who understands how the plant actually works. Deadly nightshade built one of the most notorious reputations in botanical history around a single deceptive detail. The berries taste mild and faintly sweet rather than bitter, which removes the natural warning signal most toxic fruit provides. It's found across Europe, North Africa, and parts of Western Asia, typically growing quietly along old stone walls, forest edges, and the neglected shaded borders of overgrown fields where it can go unnoticed for years. Shiny black berries, roughly the size of a small cherry, sit nestled inside a star-shaped calyx, a structure that almost looks decoratively arranged when examined up close, giving the plant an oddly attractive appearance despite its reputation. That visual similarity to genuinely edible berries is exactly what has made it so dangerous across centuries, since it doesn't look meaningfully different from fruit people actually pick and eat without a second thought. Its infamous reputation has outlived any real modern encounters with the plant for most people, surviving today mainly through old folklore, historical herbal medicine texts, and cautionary references in garden guides passed down through generations of gardeners warning each other about exactly what to avoid growing near children or pets. Yew hides its danger inside a fruit that otherwise looks completely inviting, splitting the plant into two parts that behave in almost opposite ways. The bright red, fleshy outer coating is genuinely harmless and even edible on its own, but the hard seed sealed inside that same red flesh is not, creating a strange situation where half of a single berry is safe and the other half isn't. It's been documented growing across Europe for centuries, especially common in old churchyards, carefully trimmed hedges, and the formal gardens of historic estates, where its dense evergreen foliage made it a favorite for shaping into tall living walls. A small cup-shaped red structure called an aril cradles a single dark seed at its center, almost like a tiny jewel, resting inside a deliberately built setting. Birds play a key role in how the plant spreads, eating the soft red flesh and passing the hard seed through completely undigested, carrying it well away from the parent tree in the process. Today it remains a favorite ornamental hedge plant in gardens and cemeteries worldwide, still trimmed into the same tall, dense green walls that made it a landscaping staple centuries ago, valued purely for its shape and year-round color. Starfruit looks entirely harmless to most people, but for anyone with certain kidney conditions, it can cause problems that a typical, healthy digestive system simply doesn't run into. It traces back to Southeast Asia and is now grown across tropical regions worldwide, ranging from small backyard trees to full commercial orchards, supplying grocery stores far from where the fruit originated. When sliced crosswise, it forms an almost perfect five-pointed star shape, a geometric coincidence that turned an otherwise unremarkable tropical fruit into an instant favorite for food photography and drink garnishing the moment people notice the shape. That star silhouette alone is enough to make people pause and look twice, especially once a thin slice lands on a plate or floats in a glass, since almost nothing else in a produce section forms such a clean, deliberate-looking geometric pattern naturally. Today it shows up constantly as a garnish across the world, floating on top of cocktails, layered decoratively into fruit salads, and sliced thin for plated desserts, specifically for the visual impact of that star shape, even though most people using it as decoration have no idea about the kidney-related caution tied to eating it in quantity.